Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New York Historical Society. I know many of you I've seen before, some of you at our Climate Cafe last month. But for those of you who are new, very warm welcome. I'm Louise Mirror, New York Historical's very lucky, as I always say, President and CEO, and it is a particular pleasure this evening to host an event featuring Majora Carter. She is going to be introduced by my great colleague, Russell Shorto, who is the Executive Director of our Diamonstein Spielvogel Institute for New York City History, Politics, and Community Activism. So, Russell, microphone's yours.
Thanks, Louise. Thank you all very much for being here. I want to thank Louise Mirror, who you just heard from, our boss at New York Historical, for making this happen. I also want to give a particular thanks to Barbara Lee Diamonstein Spielvogel, who could not be here tonight, but she is really the force behind the Diamonstein Spielvogel Institute and behind this series, which we call the Climate Cafe. So the Institute has, as part of its mission, gathering and collecting archives from organizations in the city over the past decades that have been devoted to issues of sustainability and environmental justice. And as a public outreach effort, we actually, Barbara Lee had the idea to develop this Climate Cafe. And her further idea was that it not be just a series of talks with interesting speakers, but that we develop it into something, a forum for debate and discussion. So as we move forward, we will develop this, and we have all of your emails, so you'll get emails from us about future events like this, but also as we develop it, you'll get emails about other projects that we have in mind. And we're also very receptive to ideas, so people who have ideas, please feel free to email us. By way of introduction of our guest today, Majora Carter, so she has this really terrific book out, which there are copies here on the on the windowsill and on the sill over here. So if you haven't gotten one, they're yours. It's a remarkable book. We're going to spend a good portion of the hour talking about it. By way of introduction, there's a very brief bio on the book. Majora Carter is an urban revitalization strategist, real estate developer, MacArthur Fellow, Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, and owner of the Boogie Down Grind Cafe in the Bronx, which is, there's some very impressive items on that list, but that really only scratches the surface. To give you just a few other of her accomplishments, she has received honorary doctorates from, I think, about half a dozen places: Wesleyan University, Augsburg College, Middlebury College, and others. She is a fellow of the Post-Carbon Institute. She won the Visionary and Sustainability Award by the National Building Museum. She was one of Utne Reader's magazine's 50 visionaries who are changing the world. She won the Liberty Medal for Lifetime Achievement, the Eleanor Roosevelt Val Kill Medal, I almost said Val Kilmer Medal, the Hollister Award from the United Nations, the Paul Wellstone Award, the Rachel Carson Award from the National Audubon Society, the New York State winner of the Women of Excellence Award, awarded by the governor, and on and on. And it turns out she is a very good writer. Please welcome our guest, Majora Carter.
I think it'd be hilarious to have a Val Kilmer Award.
And you would probably win it.
You know, like, what do you got to do to get one of those? Yeah, cool.
Welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So just to orient people and to orient you, because you're just back from Seattle, I think, right?
Yes.
We're at the New York Historical Society, this storied home of New York history. The institute sponsoring this is the Diamonstein Spielvogel Institute for New York City History, Politics, and Community Activism, which encompasses a lot, but I think your work encompasses all of that and more.
Yes.
This is the Climate Cafe, which is devoted to issues of sustainability, environmental justice, and so on. So let me ask you to start. You started with the organization Sustainable South Bronx. That's kind of what you...
Actually, I didn't.
Okay.
I started with another organization.
The Point?
Yes, and but realized that I really wanted to focus more on project-based development, which they did a lot more advocacy, and that's when I realized I kind of needed to get out there and do it that way.
And so, but Sustainable South Bronx really was this explosion.
100%, yes.
And then from that, it's been very interesting how you have evolved into advocating for communities, I guess mostly marginalized communities to take control of their economic destiny.
Exactly, yes.
I imagine you would tie those two things together, that the sustainability part is a component of the other.
Oh,
Can you
absolutely.
talk about that?
Sure. I mean, you can't really, so first of all, I don't talk about the communities that I tend to work in and want to support the most with my work, as like poor, underprivileged, or anything like that. I actually refer to them as low status community. And there's actually, I put the glossary in my book in the front just so that folks don't get twisted about what I'm talking about. Just here, this is what I mean. So, and what I mean is that, those are the type of places, whether they're inner cities or, Native American reservations or, poor white towns, in the Rust Belt, where industry is long gone. But they're the places, where inequality is assumed. And that's why we use the phrase status, because that kind of implies almost an immutability that is just sort of that's where they are, and that's how we're going to treat them. And that is, such an interesting way, we thought, to sort of look at those communities, because when you look at them, billions of dollars in both philanthropic and as well as government dollars go into those communities, but yet, whether it's, educational attainment or environmental degradation, certainly, or even health outcomes, or, bad policing, which of course is related to high incarceration rates, those are the areas where those things happen. And so much of it has to do with the way economic development has not been used. And it's just, for us, it's been a really clear way that it's so related to economic development, sustainable development, and that they're all connected. And when you fix, in particular, the economic development piece, then everything else actually goes right along with it, because quite frankly, economically disempowered people are much easier to push around.
And you make the point in the book that they themselves kind of buy into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the super hard part of being in a low status community. Inequality is assumed by both the people looking into those communities, but also those on the inside. That's why we often tend to measure our success by how far we get away from our community, and that's one of the reasons why we've decided to literally take a page, out of a business book. Which is, so when you think about it, how many of you are business owners? Okay, so you got enough. So do any of you hire people and pour training into them in the hopes that somebody else hires them away? No, that would be silly. Why would you do that? But in American low status communities, we do that. There's almost an expectation that the quote unquote talented ones are the ones that are led to believe that in order for them to be somebody, they've got to get out of their communities. And if we continue to do that, what we essentially do is continue to sort of weaken the fabric, and the social fabric of those communities, which of course then also leads to economic degradation, and also, I think, also environmental as well, because again, it's so much easier for those areas to be politically vulnerable as well. And so, but first, I think the main thing is helping people in our own communities literally give our own neighborhoods a second look. And I know, I grew up in the era literally of the burning Bronx, back in the 70s and 80s, and we lost 60%, of the Bronx's population, during those times, and seeing literally, I mean, it looked sort of like the Warsaw Ghetto after the bombings, and I've seen side by side images of that, and it's just wow, there was no war, but actually there was, And so how do we, and then, kids like me, the bright ones, were led to believe, yeah, you're going to grow up and be somebody. And I feel like that's the thing that, we kind of take in, we internalize that. And then, but what does that mean again for the people that are left behind? Like, are we actually creating more opportunities for people to stay in their own communities, to see value there, hold on to, the family home, build businesses there, and really create the kind of value and worth that they feel should apply to them? Because actually, honestly, I don't really believe that things like gentrification actually starts with developers coming in and, changing a neighborhood that, for the people that are outside of it, and so it's not when you start seeing things like doggy daycares and, or cute cafes in places where they weren't before. I think it really starts when we lead people to believe that there's no value in their own communities while they're in them.
Okay, so you grew up in Hunts Point, and you live there now.
I
and
do.
For those of you who don't know where it is, it's pretty much straight north. Like here's Manhattan, and there's the Bronx, and it kind of sticks out into the East River.
Yeah, it's a little turtle
in a point.
head.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I love it.
And you make the point in the book that you say that it's a peninsula, so it's three sides water, and you had this nice phrase, which I'm not going to remember, but it was something like government organizations see places like that as kind of environmental dumps.
Yes, absolutely.
Why is that?
Because they're politically vulnerable. I mean, when I came, I did everything kind of right. I was like identified as a smart kid, and used education to get out, and went to Bronx Science and then Wesleyan University, and only came back home because I was broke when I needed a cheap place to stay when I went to NYU for graduate school. So that was mommy and daddy's house, which was horrifying because it felt like an utter defeat, to be there. And it was just like, wait a second, I got out, like I'm back, like seriously. And but it was that education and distance that was the best thing in the world that ever happened, because of it, I got to see that, our communities aren't just made, aren't just like that. Like, they're literally through policies and regulations, and I think just, frankly, the impacts of white supremacy that have also created the types of there are no real entitlement programs, for folks of color. And, when it gets right down to it, and that actually create the kind of generational wealth that shows us that there's possibilities for us to develop our communities in ways that actually nourish us. And, and you see it in terms of, it's how much harder it is to get, loans, and, as a person of color, our properties are being valued differently. And I think, and on some level, we're valuing them differently, because of the predatory speculation that we see, and I know, and I could unfortunately speak about this from personal, from personal experience. I talk about in my book that my father, who came to the South Bronx in the 1940s, early 1940s, bought a house, was one of the first black men to live in the community. And when both my parents passed away, I could not get my siblings to hold on to the family home. And that was long before I had any kind of involved, my thinking honestly wasn't evolved at that point in terms of generational wealth and things like that. It was just like, look, that's a house and it belongs in our family, and can we keep it? Things like, and I didn't even have any kids, but I was like, y'all do, so maybe we should think about that. And, I'm the youngest of 10, 7 of us grew up in that house, and I could not get them to even think about it, because they were like, that's cute what you do, boo. We like that you do that community stuff, but I'm moving to Virginia or wherever, because to them that was success, getting out of the neighborhood. And I just realized, so now, of course, it was bought by a predatory speculator. The house is worth like 3 times what we sold it for. Okay. So things we don't talk about at family dinners.
So you're back home for reasons that you didn't want to be.
Yeah.
But how do you get from there to you started working for The Point and then Sustainable South Bronx? How did you develop that kind of environmental mindset?
Yeah. So it became clear. So one of the first things I did was actually develop I spearheaded the development of the first waterfront park our community had in more than, at the time, 60 years. And to me, it seemed like the exact opposite of what the city was planning to do, which was use another part of our waterfront to build another huge waste facility. So I was like, look, we know how we are, we know how to fight against stuff, but how do we fight for things? And I realized that even our imagination in our own communities about what we could do was stunted to some extent. And because that's just not what you do in neighborhoods like that, you build and that kind of stuff is like evidenced by, some of the initial, market survey data that we gleaned from our community about like what the community needs. And it was mostly just, places that concentrated more and more poverty, as opposed to the kind of aspirational places that they actually wanted to be in. But they saw no opportunities to do those things in their own neighborhood. So we heard things from people like, it'd be nice to have something like a park in our neighborhood, And so I was like, okay, sorry.
Now, this is before Sustainable South Bronx.
This was early.
Okay, so how do you, I assume that there are people in this room who are interested in that kind of activism. But to say, well, I had to go back home, so I'm at my parents' house, and then I spearheaded the development of a waterfront park. How do you do that?
Let me tell you, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know who I wasn't supposed to talk to. Because, there's I don't know if y'all know, but there's like all sorts of tension between grassroots groups and the government and business, and sometimes even between grassroots groups. And I just didn't know. It just was not my life. So I was just like, I'm gonna talk to anybody who will talk to me because I think this is a great idea. And after a while, we built like this incredible sort of cabal of very strange bedfellows. Like we were literally fighting with the city on one hand because they wanted to build this huge waste facility on the other on our other shore, and yet we still worked with Parks Department and Department of Transportation to turn this little dead end of a street. Literally, it was a street end that was supposed to be yet another bridge that was going to go to another interstate. Literally, like this was like the end of Robert Moses' sort of reign of terror, and that's what that street was supposed to be, that we transformed into a park. And I was just like, okay, and so much of it was literally just, I think, inspiring people to just like think a little bit differently. And that was really powerful to me because we had literally no money. Like it was a horrible thing, but we were able to, sort of like build out this idea that something like this could happen, and using city resources to just be like, oh wait, we don't do things like that here.
So you're finding like-minded people, for one thing.
Absolutely.
And then linking them together.
Yeah, even
into
within
a coalition.
Even within like various, how do you call it? Like between different, again, we weren't supposed to be friends with the city. Like I would literally hear that, from some of my colleagues, and they would literally be like, "We'll send Majora to talk to that person because she doesn't seem to mind." And it was just like, they have power there, like they can actually help, so maybe we should be nice to them so that we can get what we want. So that's, I think that is absolutely, how I've worked a lot during my career, just like being really respectful of people and what they can bring to the table in ways that actually help them feel like they actually have something to give to support things.
And is this then, there was a precursor to the Bronx River Alliance? Is that's what you're talking about? You're working on here, you're working toward that?
That was the Bronx River Working Group, and it was just a volunteer alliance of just folks that worked all along the Bronx River, and none of us were working, and this is what was really interesting, is that we were approached by a woman named Jenny Hoffner, who had been talking about, the U.S. Forest Service had actually, was interested in supporting threatened urban rivers, like all over the country. And of course, the Bronx River is one of the, like a really big one, considering that Robert Moses literally straightened it, which is just not the way rivers work. If you know anything about, ecology, they've got those beautiful little twists and turns, so that's the natural way they clean themselves. And he was just like, no, it's more important for drivers to have a cute, experience. So he, literally, it was like this crazy, engineering feat that was actually an ecological nightmare that we're still struggling with right now. But the working group was just worked on actually being like the local folks who then were sort of like the people who were there talking to city, state, federal agencies, building, academic as well as, business resources to bring them all to the table to see the value. This could be a real educational, ecological business resource, to the community. Jobs were created, as a result of that. And, for that, I'm super duper proud, of seeing those things happen, because it was just like, these were not the things, and I remember, and I talk about it in my book, like, we had so much there, especially for, many of my peers, there, because we are, low status communities around the country struggle, from ecological, from educational, health issues, all of those things. And so to them, it almost seemed like, I think I described myself as they probably thought I was like a bit of a dilettante, because, first of all, I started this work when I was 30, so I had none of that, like, youthful, none, I mean, literally none. I was like, I've been beaten up by the world. I'm just like, I just want to get some stuff done. I could care less if you like me, but I want to get some stuff done. And, actually at the time, I really did want people to like me, so that came later. But it was really funny, being in that position. So that was kind of fun.
And Sustainable South Bronx, did it come into being around one issue? Was it incinerator?
No, it was, see, now that's my problem, because I have this really awful way of biting off more than I could chew. So, we were a green collar job training and placement system. To me, there was a thread that went through everything. I was just like, this is all the same thing if you ask me. It was getting we did green collar job training and placement because we needed people to have a personal and a financial stake in improving the environment. People were just like, yeah, we love the park thing and that's cute and all, but, we do need jobs. I mean, we are a community that was, we had at that point, like almost a 30% unemployment rate. So people.
And this is a time when green jobs was a hot political thing.
Well, no, we made it.
You made it, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna claim that. Unfortunately, a lot wasn't done with it, which still, like,
because then once people were trained, then there was nowhere for them to go.
Well, but no, it was more like I think many of my peers who were in, positions to actually think about, like, what are the economic growth trends that we should be focusing on. It was much cuter to try to build things like, get a climate bill passed, at a time when, there was this black guy as president in the executive, branch, that a lot of folks, in either houses didn't really like. So it's just like, you're not going to get that. Like, why are you trying? And, but we were just more, so that was more on the climate, mitigation side. And I thought that there was a whole lot, like much smarter to literally thinking about climate adaptation. So are we, doing ecological restoration of wetlands, within our communities? Are we doing more along the lines of energy efficiency programs, like literally like digging down the kind of things that both red and blue states needed? And it was just like, that's where we should be building businesses. And I don't think that was ever really considered like much of a real focus, for many folks that had the power to do so.
And you left that world in 2008, I think?
Yes. And in part, that was like one of the reasons why I was like, I'm done. Because it just felt like we've got to be strategic about how we build, the kind of communities and economic developments that support our communities. And how we do that, I think, is the most important thing. But we've got to be super strategic and not just do things because we feel like that's sort of like the how do you call it, the focus at the time, without any real analysis about what's maybe not sexy, because energy efficiency is not sexy. Wetland restoration wasn't sexy, but it got people employed. And I think we could have done a whole lot more, and it would have like crossed, into both, I think conservative as well as more liberal, areas, because mostly it was about job creation, and I felt like that's what we need to do. I mean, it was kind of like, it's gone now, unfortunately, but Governor Hochul did this, tried to put in her budget like these incredible, I think it was like a total of $4 billion, to do a whole bunch of things that would essentially, not only, like I think it was like 200 million homes, like actually turn them into, electrify them. But, in 2020 alone, there were more than 120,000 jobs. In 2020, that industry actually showed, the energy efficiency world showed job creation. And I'm like, and unfortunately, those, I don't think much of that passed, unfortunately. But seeing things like that is super important, because I really did believe that what she was doing was like the smartest thing, because it's just like, this is where the jobs are. This also has an impact, on the climate in a real strategic way. And so connecting those two is the smartest thing that we could potentially do.
You have a consulting company.
I do.
When did that start?
2008.
Okay, so
Yeah.
right then you switched gears into this.
Yeah.
And you consult with communities.
Communities or universities or business.
Businesses.
Actually, we've done like quite a few like business, like incubators and things of that nature.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So using Hunts Point as a
Well, my my community is really my research and development
Right,
lab.
right.
So I try stuff out there and then show people what's possible.
Okay, so you touched on before this survey that you did.
Yes.
Because one of the issues that you talk about in the book is what's the term, the nonprofit industrial complex,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That there's all these well-meaning people and
Yeah.
organizations, and they do things like they build affordable rental properties and community centers and things like that. But then you surveyed people in these communities, and those weren't the things they wanted.
No, and not that I feel there's anything wrong with affordable housing or community centers, but if that's really all that's located within those communities, what you'll also find if you see like affordable housing for the lowest economic bands, coupled with homeless shelters, or in places where the only real local sort of like third space, and third spaces are sort of like urban planning parlance for things like places that are neither work nor home, and where people build community, right? And so, but when when you're concentrating poverty, when it's with the insertion of health clinics, highly subsidized health clinics, very subsidized affordable housing, even opportunities more for folks to spend more time in correction facilities within those communities, and be over policed in every single way, then what you have is the concentration of poverty, which then tends to exacerbate all the things that we keep saying that that the nonprofit industrial complex says they're trying to deal with. Everything from, but what you'll see in those areas, lower educational attainment, higher rates, of poor health outcomes, higher rates of bad policing, and thus subsequent incarceration. And it's the kind of place that makes people, it's really no wonder why people feel like they need to measure success by how far they get away from their communities. And I don't blame them. I was one of them.
You did the same thing,
I
yeah.
did. But when I realized like why this is happening and why it continues to happen, and you realize it's because there's a lot of folks that are making buttloads of cash to continue the concentration of poverty and act like that's a good thing for us. But again, when we ask people, so what are you looking for in the community that you desire? None of the, because we were wondering like, the way the nonprofit world kind of looks at our communities, it's almost as if poverty is a cultural attribute. Like it's literally, like practically in our DNA. And I knew it wasn't in mine. It's like, I love much of my culture, but I really do. But that wasn't it, even though I did grow up in really poor. But poverty wasn't what moved us at all. And I don't know of anybody, who's moved in that way. But when you realize that that's the way that we're thought of, but when you ask people, so what are you looking for? They'd say things like, they wanted cool places to hang out in. They wanted cafes, they wanted bars and bookstores. They wanted housing that actually matched their income, because many people within low status communities work really hard to support the kids that are there. But then they're literally extracted out, because even if they did want to live close to their parents, because when we ask people like, oh, what are you moving out for? It was almost never things like, oh, the crime is terrible. It was just like, there's nothing to do here. Literally. And I can't, they're building so much, affordable housing for incredibly poor folks that I don't qualify, even though I'd really love to live near my parents. But that's not what was happening. And so what we do is actually we work to build the kind of lifestyle infrastructure that's what we call things like cafes and bars that literally make people feel like they need to give their community a second look, so to make them feel like there is something worth sticking around. And when you do that, a bunch of things happen. We realize that folks sort of see their community in a different way, and then they start to see that much of it is absolutely deliberate. One of my favorite stories about this book is what's been happening as a result of it. So I met a woman, actually just even before it came out, and she bought the book, and she was living in Jersey, and she was from a low status community out in Jersey, and she had actually sold her house to a group of investors, which is basically, real estate parlance for predatory speculators, who they're the ones that do things like they'll call up, in particular, older people and be like, they'll look to see who's kind of behind on taxes, and then and then call them up and be like, we can pay that for you, because most people don't know the value of their land. And this is not just here, it's all over our country. It's all over our country. And but this was a young woman who was just sort of like, actually offered me what she thought was a pretty decent price. And but she bought my book and was just like literally about to sell the house. And she was just like, okay, going through the process. And she was in that 3-day waiting period where, you've got the chance to either, cancel the sale or keep it. And she saw my book. And then she was, was sitting around and then sat down to read it. She read it all in one sitting. And then literally called up her broker and just said, you know what? Cancel the sale. I'm not selling my child's inheritance. And that kind of stuff makes me just go, that's why I did that book. Because if we're not seeing the value in our own communities, then somebody else does. And, and believe me, I understand systemic racism and how it's literally created the lack of economic, diversity and generational wealth in our communities. But again, because I think of the impact, of white supremacy and making us believe that there's no real value, in our communities, we believe that to a certain extent. We internalize a lot of that. And so unless there's a move to be like, how about we question that? Just think about it. Just please. And then suddenly folks are like, oh my God. And what I'm hoping this book is just because I'm like, look, I'm not trying to wag my finger at anybody. That's not the point. But again, all I really want is for people to take a second look and just think about what they have and what they have to offer. Because that's really all I want. I want people to feel like they've got something to give to this world. And so many of us don't. And I think that's why so many of us are just so unhappy.
Let me ask one broad question to kind of pull you back in the environmental direction, and then I'll open it up for people to ask their questions. You use the word extracting talent from communities, and you use the word in the title, reclaiming.
Yes.
You talk about monocultures, like how we tend to organize in socioeconomic monocultures, and diversity.
Right.
All of these are terms that environmentalists use too. So I'm thinking you have this underlying point that is, we somehow as a society have this notion that we're doing it wrong somehow. we pull all the good stuff out, then we say, oh my God, we have to reclaim that. And that applies both to environmental degradation and communities.
If you've probably seen those maps when you lay when they do GIS studies of an area that their poverty rates, their environmental burdens, and their economic problems and issues, and that it's the same places, right? And so seeing that it is connected, and yeah, I remember because I've always had look. So my parents are from the South. My dad's from Georgia and my mom's from South Carolina, and they both grew up incredibly poor. Kids of sharecroppers. My father, actually he was the son of enslaved people, both his mom and his dad. And so, but
your father was much older than your mother.
Yes, right? Yeah. Daddy was 60 years older than he was 60 when I was born, and and I was definitely they were not trying to have another child, but. there I was. Yeah. My siblings never let me forget that. They thought my brother was going to be the youngest. But anyway, but yeah, so seeing things, so it was, so we did grow up, you know, in a space where we had to, you know, everything had to be used several times. You know, like, I remember my mom, it was so cute, which I don't think I put this in the book, but I can't believe I didn't. But she was like really proud of the fact that our garbage was the smallest on the street, because she reused everything. And it was just like, she just couldn't understand like how people like threw away perfectly good stuff. And she wasn't a hoarder or anything. She was just like, and she would make like beautiful things. We actually couldn't pay things like light bills a lot. And so she would make like, we had all sorts of candles, and she would make like beautiful candles. She would sculpt the wax like into these beautiful flowers that she would then give to people, and they loved her for it. Like little stupid things like that like I absolutely remember, that just remind me, it's like, you know, this was stuff that we've always been doing, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, my first job, also not in the book, but I'll tell you this, one of my first jobs in media was at HBO. And you know how folks would, especially in low status neighborhoods, you know, you'd get all those circulars, those like circulars they leave under the door, and they're really horrible. I would gather them together, and because HBO had a recycling program, and I would like look over my shoulders as I put them in their recycling thing, because I could not bear to throw them out, because it just seemed like a crazy thing to do. So I think like that's always been like a part of me. So it just, so I don't need, you know, to be, whether, actually I was a B Corp for a while, but you know, part of it was just like, this is just what we do. And you know, within our communities, and certainly within the type of developments that I work on, I'm super excited because so since I'm in the New York Historical Society, one of my projects just was put on the National Register for Historic Places, which I'm super excited about. It's a former rail station designed by Cass Gilbert, the same architect that did the Woolworth Building, and we're transforming it into an event hall. And so yeah, so it's on the list, which I'm super, in the Bronx, yeah. Really? Wait,
The one in Hunts Point.
oh,
Yeah.
cool. So I have to add the new ones so that you can, just so you could see the trends, the thing. But it's a beautiful story about that, because my dad was a Pullman porter, and that's the reason why he wanted to move to that neighborhood, because his line was the Harlem New Haven line, and so he won $15,000, you know, in the early 1940s, you know, at a racetrack, because yes, he played the ponies, and literally brought it home, and you know, brought it to New York. He was living in Harlem, and so you know, you moved on up to the Bronx, like back in the day, and he found a family, the Sacco family, Italian family, that actually was willing to sell to a black man, and he plunked the money down, and of course, but sadly, they never reopened that rail station again. That was that was his hope, but they didn't. But he would actually tell the you know, have the conductor sort of stop the train or slow it down so that he could climb up the embankment instead of going all the way down to Penn Station. So so I just think about that, and that, you know, his baby daughter actually owns that building. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
Do people have questions? And if you have a question, and if you work or are interested in a certain area that's related, let us know. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts. I'd love for you to talk more about the nonprofit industrial complex and what you think could be done to break that orientation along
Yeah.
various nonprofits to avoid addressing, as you say, the underlying disease rather than just the symptoms.
Yes. I mean, so, you know, just like the military industrial complex or any other kind, you know, it exists to perpetuate itself. Now, I don't have an issue, you know, with the actual tax designation. I think it's actually a really powerful thing that could be used, but instead, I feel like it's sort of like, so much of it has actually been steeped in white supremacy, that in terms of how the money is put out there. And as far as I know, there was only one foundation that did the analysis and looked at their giving, and was just like, the Central Indiana Community Foundation literally did that, and they were just like, oh, you know what, we do that. And I'm sure they weren't and I know that they're not the only one, but I think they happen to be one of the only ones that do it. Stuff like, or, the fact that I think it's less than 2%, of climate justice organizations for foundation giving go to, go to organizations led by people of color. And they're the ones that are most impacted by these climate issues. So things like that really drive me crazy. But again, I don't have any issue with it is a tax designation, and I think they don't do enough. Like, honestly, I think if especially big foundations, like, literally became, like, decided to supplant predatory speculators and private equity, who's, like, doing so much to create wealth inequality in this country, by buying, the kind of houses, because they do own like 15% of the housing stock in this country. And it's almost all of it is in low status community. They're not buying like fancy stuff. They're only buying the houses that regular people can afford, to build their American dream. So, but if foundations wanted to do something good, and sort of get in the way of that kind of nonsense, they could literally buy those houses. Once after people are well aware, the people that own those homes are well versed in what they're actually worth, they could buy those houses and just sit on them so people can get a mortgage, because that's the problem. Holding companies don't need a mortgage. That's why they buy their houses for cash, people's houses for cash. And, regular people, as far as I know I do, need things like mortgages. But you can't compete, and if somebody doesn't believe in the value of their community, then they'll see, this like money in their hand that could literally get in their hand in a week. Even if it's not even worth the value of what they're offering is even close to the value, of their property. They don't know any better. And so that's like one of the things I think we really need to think about. And, I've been saying that for years, but nobody really pays attention. But they just might. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, no, who gets to choose?
Yeah.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. Great. And whoever's listening, the red wine was fabulous.
Okay.
So,
Maybe that's all you wanted to say.
no, that is fine. I just want to make sure I'm hearing. Got me thinking about a lot of things I hadn't thought about before, especially about I think a lot about white flight. I hadn't really thought about it as also Black aspirational or people of color aspirational flight. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep. Oh, definitely.
So I'm thinking about gentrification, and do you see, I don't want to ask you a close-ended question, but how do you see so people are staying in their communities, perhaps leaving and getting educated, or staying and being educated, and then coming back and trying to, and with the goal of supporting their communities. Is that okay?
Mhm. Yeah.
As opposed to leaving and others coming in and exploiting.
Right.
Does that change, or would that be different in terms of property value going up? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how would a shift in this dynamic
Mhm.
potentially affect gentrification? But I'm not even sure if that's really a question. It's just sort of
Maybe you could in addressing that, you use the term self-gentrification.
Yeah, well, I don't, as I've said in the book, I don't use that term anymore but it's related, so I will share this. I was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina, visiting an HBCU, which is Johnson C. Smith University, and the university and some local development groups and financial institutions literally decided that they were going to support local developers to redevelop their community, which had never happened before. But there was, of course, some people who were just like, they saw development. They almost probably couldn't see, that it was Black people doing the development, because it was just like almost too crazy to even acknowledge. I mean, I get that now, and I'm like, hi, no, that's my building. Thank you very much. But it's kind of interesting. So they saw stuff happening, and we're just like, oh my God, somebody's coming to gentrify us. And the head of the college was this amazing, preacher, actually marched with King as a kid, and he was just like, gentrification? No, these are your sons and daughters doing this work. Like, they're rebuilding their community from the inside out for the people that are in it. If anything, it's self-gentrification, if you want to call it that. And I thought, oh, what an interesting term, because it was like, I was like, last time I checked, people in our communities like nice things too. And that's why they leave the neighborhood in order to experience them. So I was like, how about we build things like that in our own communities? And so I used the term, and some folks, I mean, a lot of people completely got it. They were just like, yeah, why do we do that? Why do we think like our neighborhoods are nothing with us in them? And they were just like, no, I want great stuff. I want to, buy property here. I want to, or rather keep my family's property and, grow wealth for my own family that way. I want to start a business here that supports my community. It was just like, I mean, seeing stuff like that has been really wonderful. But there were folks who were just saw the gentrification part and and literally hated me in every single way. So we were protested, because I started a coffee shop, and to them that's the harbinger of gentrification, and it's just like, but if a coffee shop is, I was like, first of all, coffee is literally the blackest beverage on the planet, literally from the blackest and brownest parts of this earth. Why are we like giving away like the most profitable part, of the industry? Especially since we drink it all the time. You leave our neighborhoods to go deal with it. It's like, please shut up. I cannot deal. I just can't. So, but we started this, but we were protested. Big banners outside the door with like, awful things written about me, and all sorts of profanity. And what was super ironic about the whole thing was that it was when the day that we were protested was the day that we were hosting a workshop for these nonprofit lenders that specifically were there to support local homeowners and small business owners with low interest loans and literally 0% interest loans. But again, that was so far out of the realm of possibility because fear is real. And even though people, within our own community, and I think rightfully, have some reasons to be afraid, but that also gives you an opportunity to learn, like, well, what do we do to get ourselves in a position so that we can build something? And so to that end, we literally just started, a partnership with Keller Williams, who's hosting, home ownership readiness, projects, literally just for ways to, and they come to the cafe twice a week, and they just host open hours, and to get people learning about what they need to just build up their credit, so that, because everybody's not ready for anything right now, but you can find out like what you need in order to do that. And again, everybody's not gonna buy a house, but just the fact of learning how to do it can literally help people, move up their own, support their own economic well-being. So I think to your question, it's more about, are we creating new opportunities for people within our community to see the diversity within it? Or or do we want to continue, with this idea that the status quo, of poverty as a cultural attribute is all we ever will be? And that is not what I'm hearing. It's not what I'm seeing. And, what we are missing, are opportunities to develop, at a scale in which our communities can develop along with us.
Believe it or not, the hour is just about up. We can do one more question. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here. And as a native of Brooklyn, I have seen a lot of predatory housing.
Yep.
Just totally being people who don't know the value of their
Right.
homes.
Yeah.
Talking Bed-Stuy,
Yep.
talking Crown Heights. I know I was around the time when Clinton Hill wasn't exactly
Yep.
Clinton Hill, it was redlining.
Yep.
So now what happens is the predators, they will approach a little old lady
Yep.
or a little old man.
Yep.
They'll befriend them and they'll try to get their house and they'll say, oh, you need your roof done, you need this done. And I have money right here in the bank.
Yes, literally.
I don't need any lawyers. I have my lawyers with me. And I think that a lot of times that these homeowners, they're thinking they don't know the value of their home.
Nope.
And they're thinking, I paid $5,000
Yep.
in 1965.
Yep.
And he's going to give me $150,000.
Yep.
And to that, I ask you this.
Right.
don't want to, they don't know.
Yeah, right,
They know that they don't really, there's nowhere for them to go.
right, right, right.
Even if they sell their home for $100,000.
Where are they gonna go?
Also, the kids who are left with, who inherit the property, they don't know.
Nope. Like my own family, yep, totally.
It says, I'll give you $100,000
Mhm.
for a home, a brownstone that's worth 1.7.
Yep.
100,000
Yep.
in the eyes of a 25-year-old. You know how many kids you think that is?
Yep,
You know?
it's true.
So my question to you is, what do you think about community land trusts?
I mean, unfortunately, the way that I've seen, I love the idea of them, and I was first introduced to them actually up in Vermont, where a trust owns the land, and then the house is actually owned by the people. But that's often not the way that I find when many folks in New York City talk about community land trusts. It's not about creating generational wealth. And that's why, like here, and there might be some, but I've just been underwhelmed by many of the kind of conversations that I've seen happening about it. It's usually just like, we want to build a community center. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not going to help, create more, opportunities, for generational wealth for at least some of the folks within your communities. And it's not going to be everybody, because some folks don't want to own a home. It's just like, it's a big responsibility. And we do need to have like a very diverse way of showing the different ways, whether it's, different levels of affordable housing, some home ownership. I do think real opportunities for community land trusts, like the real ones, is something that I'd love to see more of, and that's the kind of thing that, again, philanthropy can do. Like, why not? Like, they can hold it. Land's like such a great investment. Like, hold on to it. It's like, it's never gonna, it'll do just well. Yeah, exactly. But to your other point, of people not fully understanding, we've actually been proposing that landowners in low status communities actually become a protected class under the Security and Exchange Commission, so that before the second, something like that, crosses the Department of Buildings or Department of Finance, before it crosses, and actually goes to the deal signed, you have the same way that, if you are accused of committing a crime, if you can't afford legal counsel, it'll be provided to you. The same thing should happen, for people that own land, especially in our communities. So that's what we're pushing for right now.
You know what? You know as well as I do that Louise likes to end on time. But you'll stick around a little bit?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
totally.
we're going to mingle a little bit,
Yeah.
have a glass of wine, have another glass of red wine.
I know, I'm going to try that red wine.
And I just want to say that if you haven't read the book, what's fascinating to me about it is that Majora, all these things having to do with climate and sustainability and the environment, recycling or paper versus plastic and things like that, this is kind of underneath all of that, which is what's so fascinating. It has to do with structural change to society. So thank you very much for the book.
You.
Thank you for
thank you.
this talk.
Thank you.